Today is a very special day. It's a day that we set aside, and it's oftentimes a moment where we commemorate some different people that are going to be in this room. Jesus said that no greater love has none than this, that a man laid down his life for their friends. And in many ways, the people that we're about to acknowledge know this firsthand. They set aside comfort, leaving family, loved ones, having to stretch themselves physically and emotionally. Many of them have seen loss, and from some that I've spoken with, have been haunted by the things that they've seen that they cannot unsee. And while there are so many messes in politics, these are men and women that have said in the midst of the mess, there are still some things worth fighting for, and there's some things worth preserving. And so as a church, we want to take a moment to acknowledge our veterans in our midst. If you're a veteran, could you please stand up? You stay standing if you can. And we know as veterans, actually stay standing if you can. As veterans, this wasn't done by yourself as well. Veterans have family members, loved ones, children, wives, spouses that have said, I'm willing to let my spouse make the ultimate sacrifice while I make the sacrifice at home. So if you're an immediate family member, a child or a wife or a spouse or a parent of a veteran, would you please stand as well? Because this sacrifice and commitment goes to you as well. Thank you. It seems, it's just not enough. It's just not enough to say thank you. But you've been willing to pay the ultimate price, to give the ultimate sacrifice for us. And so it really is from the bottom of our hearts that we say thank you on this Veterans Day. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to roll this morning. Are you guys ready? Let's do this. We had a great weekend. Did you have a good weekend? Hopefully you had a good weekend, a meaningful weekend, maybe with some of your veteran family and friends. We had a great weekend. This past Saturday, our high school students from Moraine, along with students from Harvest and Bethel, hosted an outreach here at Shepherd High School. And they broke the mold a little bit, maybe even broke some faces, because they hosted a dodgeball tournament. And they said, you know what, rather than doing it on a regular weekday, let's do it on a Saturday. But it was a leap of faith because they've never done anything on a school campus on a day when there's no school. Would students show up? Would people be a part of it? Would people want to come out and hear the gospel? And it was really awesome to see that 10 teams registered and over 80 students came to play and watch and hear the gospel for the first time. I think we got a photo of that here. Is that up on the screen? There we are. So they're listening to the stuff. I just want to say I'm so amazed by the boldness and the passion of our students. There's another outreach coming soon to Eisenhower High School, and it's amazing to see the passion they have for the gospel. They want their students to know Jesus, and they don't really know how to get it going, and so with a little bit of coaching and a little bit of help from some of those that are further along and more seasoned with them, they're pulling these outreaches off. They're happening on campus, and students are responding to the gospel, and it's just really, really encouraging to be a part of it. And we get to share in that together, so that's pretty cool. Just wanted to share that with you. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but yeah, you can clap for that. Clap for the students. It's amazing. Honestly, if I was a high school student, I wouldn't do it. I would be terrified. I know if I was putting myself back in their shoes, I'd probably be like, well, what? Huh? No. Okay, I'll just, no. But they did, and it's really cool. And so I'm just really, so keep praying for them. Keep praying for these outreaches and that students respond, and it's just great stuff. And if you're just tuning with us as a church or just checking with us online, we've been a part of a conversation called Redefined, and it's all about discipleship. It's all about what it means to be a disciple. I'm not sure what gets you out of bed in the morning. Sometimes it's when I get out of bed, it's knowing that I'm an employee, that I'm a spouse, that I'm a parent. There's responsibilities that get me out of bed. For some of us, when we get out of bed, we wake up knowing that we've got a mountain to climb. We've got a mountain of health issues to overcome. We've got a mountain of financial troubles to overcome. We've got a mountain of family things to sort out. When we wake up in the morning, what is your waking thought? And as a church, when we looked at this word redefined, we wanted to redefine ourselves to say that the first thing that defines who we are as people and as a church is a disciple. And we asked our question and we started dreaming, what would it look like if collectively we woke up first to the reality that what we get to wake up to is getting to know Jesus personally and helping others know him as well. To know Jesus, to become more like him, and to help others do the same. What if that was the first driving thing of our heartbeats? And that's been what the series has been all about. And last week, we explored the question, why the Bible? Why is the Bible central to discipleship? Why is it central to who we are as a church? And we looked at a few convictions. And today, I want to take a similar approach and ask the question, why Jesus? Because if discipleship's going to happen in your life, if you're actually going to want to make a disciple of somebody else, we have to have the conviction that Jesus is the way. We sang some amazing things about who Jesus was just a moment ago, and I just felt my heart stirring inside. But when I have that conviction, I find new boldness. But I'm not going to make a disciple if I don't have a conviction that Jesus is the way, and I'm not going to allow Jesus to change me if I don't think Jesus is the primary way. Why Jesus in a world, in a marketplace, in a sea of ideas? Why would we as a church say, the one thing we want to build our lives on is Jesus? Why make such a big deal of him? And especially in this world. I mean, tolerance is a huge but often misunderstood virtue of our culture. I mean, over time, it comes to mean a little bit like everyone can define their own truth, and as long as your truth doesn't interfere with my truth, we're okay. And we have this idea out there, and we have friends and family out there that don't know Jesus, and we're asked with that question, how do I talk to them about Jesus, especially when this virtue of tolerance and openness comes out of hands. Have you guys seen this image, by the way, that's on the screen? I think it's called Coexist, if we'll put it up there. How many of you guys have seen this image on a bumper sticker or somewhere else? And we've seen this everywhere. This is a popular idea that it's a romantic idea that we can all get along, and behind it is that we just be peaceful with one another. Let's just be tolerant with one another. Now, behind it is a nice idea that we should be kind and loving and respectful of all people. I'm not at all putting that side of the movement down. But underneath it is this assumption that if we could just look at the basic truth of every religion, we'd find out that we're all basically saying the same thing. And so why make such a big deal about what you believe and what I believe, as long as we believe the same thing? And in a world where everyone says it's just okay to pick whatever you want to pick, how do we be a church that makes disciples? And when we're faced with so many different options, how do we make sure that we're making ourselves in one conviction to say that one person I want to build my life around is the person of Jesus? Actually, just here's a couple of questions that come up over the years that I've been talking with different people and friends, family, loved ones. They say this: how can you say that one religion is right when there are good, devout, caring people of many faiths out there? So you're telling me that because you believe in Jesus and you want me to believe in Jesus, that I'm wrong and that you're right. That seems to go against our cultural understanding of what it means to be polite and tolerant. And there's so many devout people. You mean to tell me that those people that maybe are more devout than you are actually not in a good standing when there's so many different faiths? No one really knows what happens after we die. Hear this one a lot. So how can we really say we have the truth and know that there's actually one way? All religions, if you look at it, this is one I hear probably the most, is all religions are basically the same. As long as you believe something, you're good. And along with that sentiment, as long as you're trying somehow in your life to better yourself and be a better person and a good upstanding citizen, no matter what faith system you choose, just believe something. It's better than believing nothing. Last night, Thomas, Michelle, and I got to go to a restaurant, and I won't say the name of the establishment. It's a really awesome place, and I love their food. And they had napkins, and on the napkins, they had blessings from different faiths on the napkin. And I was like, that's kind of cool. That's all these different types of family meal prayers. And so in some ways, it was educational. This is how different people of different faiths pray before their meal. This is how they ask for blessings for the meals that they're thankful for. But underneath it was the assumption that we're all praying for good things and that all these things are on equal footing. It's a nice idea, but how do we answer that question, why Jesus? How would you answer it? If we're going to be a church that's making disciples, do we have a conviction in our hearts to say, Jesus, you are my all in all? And when I think about the world that's out there, I see Jesus as my hope. Now, before we go further, I want to know what I don't want to intend to happen. I don't intend to disrespect any other people of different faiths and not use any of this information as a weapon. Instead, I hope this morning we can actually see that it's quite reasonable to conclude that not all religions and all faith systems are on the same playing field. In fact, all religions would agree the same thing, anyone that's devout in any of those religions. And that if we can actually look at those things, it can actually lead us to point our lives to something bigger and greater. And I believe that answer is Jesus. So let's start with the question, aren't religions all basically the same? Aren't they all basically the same? And a lot of you guys are scholars in this place. We're Moraine Valley Church. We know that we're experts in this place. So some of this is going to be brushing up on this stuff. But let's just humor me for a moment and say, aren't religions all basically the same? And in many ways, let's start with religions and where they're similar. All faith systems and worldviews try to answer these 4 questions: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Origin is, where do I come from? Every religion is going to try to answer that question. Every worldview, every faith system, every philosophy is going to answer that question, where do I come from? Meaning, what am I here for? What is the meaning of life? What is life all about? All religions, faith systems, philosophies will talk about morality. What's the best way to live in society, with people, with the world around us? How should I live my life? And then finally, the question of destiny is, where is all this life headed? Where's this life going? What's it all for? So again, where do I come from? What am I here for? How should I live my life? Where is my life headed? And if you look at those questions, yes, at the surface, most religions are basically similar in that they try to answer those questions. And all faith systems try to address humanity's problem and offer a solution. All faith systems try to address humanity's problem and try to offer a solution. And what I mean by that is it doesn't take being alive very long to realize that our world is beautiful, but it's broken. It doesn't take getting out of bed and looking in the news more than a couple minutes to realize that our world is amazing. There's incredible things, but it's broken. And so much of our society and world is driven out of anxiety and fear. Our messaging, our advertisements, all these things are built around insecurities. So many things are built in taking advantage of the sort of brokenness in the side of the world. When you wake up, you see news about fires in California, recent shootings, there's racial divides, our leaders are a mess, there's human trafficking, and that's just our country. That doesn't just talk about the rest of the world. And we see it in ourselves, don't we? And we can say that we're beautiful people. I know you wake up in the mirror and you're like, I'm pretty beautiful. I like that. But after you get over that part of yourself, and for some of us it's a little bit longer, but when I look at it, it's like a couple seconds of admiring myself, I realize I don't have to look at myself very long to realize that there's a brokenness inside of me. I mean, even Paul said it in our own scriptures. It's like, I know the good that I should do, but I don't do it. And I know the wrong that I shouldn't do, but I do that instead. And who can save me from this body of sin and death? We see this struggle of warring inside of us. We have ethics, we have principles, we even set up our own moral institutions that are in governments, and we can't even keep those without having some kind of law and law enforcers. Like we just, as a people, we need help obeying the law. It's inside of ourselves. So it's outside of us and it's inside of us. And all faith systems try to work to answer those questions. But once you start to look at how they answer those faith systems, it's really easy to see that not all faith systems are the same and that not all go to the same place. And you quickly discover that they're very different and they cannot all exist at the same time and be equally true. So while coexist is a nice idea, all are claims for truth and all those claims are exclusive and all cannot be exclusively true at the same time. Ravi Zacharias puts it this way: we are often told that today that faith systems are superficially different but fundamentally the same. But if you talk with anyone devout in their faith, you will discover at best all faiths are superficially the same, but fundamentally different at their core. When you look at all stuff. So we can illustrate that a little bit by asking the question, can all truth claims be same at the same time without excluding the other? And just real basic, let's just go through a couple. You guys ready to run with me on this? Hopefully you are. If you're like, maybe not, well, we're here. So here we go. So, drop the clip. Atheism versus theism. No God exists versus God exists. So on this side, let's say I believe God exists. And on this side, I believe that God does not exist. I can stand in one camp or the other camp, but both camps cannot be true at the same time without excluding another faith. If I believe God exists, and if there is a God, if it turns out to be true that a God exists, then the claims of someone who's atheist, meaning there is no God, there's no theism, there's no God behind this, cannot be true at the same time. Does that make sense? Or likewise, if I'm on this side, I'm over here and I'm saying, you know what, I believe that no God exists, and I turn out to be right, then if this truth claim is correct, then that truth claim cannot be true at the same time. Just at the very core of these two systems, right now it starts to fall apart. And so you have to ask yourself, what decision do you want to pick on? What camp do you want to find yourself in? And one thing, I don't want to spend a lot of time here, because my talk isn't really about trying to prove the existence of God or the evidence of God. And you can make a whole series based on that. But today, I just want to at least point out that faith and science are not mutually exclusive. Science is a discipline of observation and categorization of what already exists. We can look at things, we can categorize it, we can explain it, we can do math, and those are incredibly important disciplines, and they're incredibly awesome and valuable, and they're provable. But they cannot prove what does not exist. They can only value and measure what does exist. Both of them are not mutually exclusive, but rather atheism and faith are postures of the heart. Atheism and faith are postures of the heart. I say this with the students all the time, that you tend to find what you look for in life. And so if you're coming from an atheistic posture and says there is no God, you're going to look at the evidence that you see in front of you, whether it's math, science, and other things, and say, well, see, this evidence seems to point that there isn't a God. But that same pool of evidence, a person of faith with that posture could say, I believe there is a God. They could look at that and say, wow, doesn't that point to the amazing creator that we have? An atheist can look at the mountains and explain maybe how the mountains got formed and where the mountains came from, and explaining how those mountains got formed using other areas of science may be incredible and important. And they could say, well, that says there is no God, but it cannot prove that a God didn't put those forces in motion. Does that make sense? Tracking with me so far? It takes faith to believe that this all came from nothing, just as much as it takes faith that it came from something. And so the question you have to ask if you're going to be in this world is, are you going to fall in this camp or this camp? And for me personally, I tend to follow the conviction that when I look at the world and the creation around me, and I see the order that's behind it, I see math that is reproducible and everything that seems to be amazing in this order, how can order come from chaos? It never happens. Order never comes from chaos. Order only comes from intelligence. And when I look at this world and everything around me, I say, man, I could look at all the evidence and it helps me to think, man, this all came from something. And I think it takes a bigger leap of faith to think that something came from nothing. I mean, have you ever thought about this? But like, how long is nothing sitting around before nothing decided to change its mind and become something? And what changed nothing's mind to create something? Something had to have done that. What put that thing in motion? And when you start looking through some of the bigger questions in life, and I'm not meaning to make this trite, because these are some brilliant minds that have wrestled around these two camps, but when I come to the conclusion, I find myself saying, man, this I think came from something. There was a common story, if you've maybe heard this. There's a man who had a dream or a vision who stood before God, and he was an atheist, and he said, God, I figured out how the universe works. And through math and through science and through principles and all these other physics and stuff, he said, I could show you how the world exists. And then God said, well, can you explain how we all came to be? And so then God went down and he stooped down in the dirt and he formed a human being. And then he breathed life into its lungs and there was a human being alive. And the scientist said, I can show you how he did that. And the scientist bent down and started forming it. And God said, make your own dirt. So depending on which way we camp, I think both systems, bottom line, what I want to get to is that both systems take faith and both cannot be true at the same time and be existence. And as a Christian, Hebrews 11 says this. It says, faith is now the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. When we look at the things around us, the things that we hope for, we find evidence in the world. We find evidence around us of the things not seen. We can't see God, but we can see evidence of God all around us. And so we find ourselves in this place of both of these places, these faiths existing side and side. They can't, just rewind. Both of these things side by side, they cannot exist at the same time. And the two belief systems are also huge in their implications for our lives. If there is no God, that means there is no purpose, there is no meaning, and there is no hope for your life. You are simply a matter of molecules and atoms. You're made up of non-living things, and so your memories, your thoughts, your ideas, your dreams, your hopes, they're just synapses. They're not any bearing on any real life. They're just things that you personally experience and no one else experiences, and that means there's no meaning for your hope. That means there's no meaning to your pain. There's no meaning for your loss. There's no meaning for your dreams, because there's no intention when there's no creator behind this. But if there's a creator, that means there's intention, there's imagination, there's creation, there's dream, there's life, and there's purpose. And with your life, if there is a God, that means there is purpose for you and for me. And so if we're willing to move from this camp and say, you know what, it makes more sense for me to move from no God to God, let's look at the systems that do believe in God, and do they all fall on the same playing field? Okay, so maybe we could say coexist, but I won't take the atheist part of it. We'll just coexist with faith systems. Can we all be the same and be at the same spot? And so let's look at those. So first one question we have to ask is, there one God or many gods? Because in those faith systems, there are some faiths that say that there's one God, and there's other faith systems that say there's many gods. There's one God or there's many gods. Again, let's do that again. There's over here, let's do the many God camp. And this could be true. If there's many gods, then there's many gods. But that does not mean that the claim over there then is true. They cannot exist at the same time. So if I'm a person of a Hindu faith and I believe that there's over 2 million gods, that is either true, or I could be of a Judeo-Christian background and say I believe there's one God. There can either be one God or many. They can't both exist at the same time. So then the question we have to ask ourselves is, how can these, if they can't exist at the same time, and we're able to look at these and say, which one seems to explain my situation better than others? Does the order, does the experience, everything I go through in life seem to be better represented by one God who personally knows me, who's involved in my life, and who's there and who's noble and relatable, or many gods that are part of many aspects of creation and many things that we can be a part of? But which one seems to explain my circumstances better? And if I'm willing to move from one camp to another, am I willing to say that one camp could be best? In other words, if I'm willing to say that it seems to make more sense that atheism is less plausible than theism, and I move over here and I say, okay, if I'm a theist and I believe that there's a God behind it, and I'm willing to say that maybe it makes more sense that one God is better than many gods, if I'm willing to shift through these worldviews, and I believe our friends and our families would do the same if we talk to them, that eventually they come to the conclusion that if I'm willing to say that one seems better than another, is it possible? Is it possible that one is best? And I think to answer that question, we have to look at how they identify man's problems and the solution that they offer. And that kind of, I think, is best explained with a ladder. I think Jeff's going to get a ladder here with his big muscles coming up here. All religions we talked about is like origin, destiny, meaning, and morality. And here he comes. And all of them try to address what is humanity's problems. They all address that something's broken about this world. Even though it's beautiful, something's broken. And they all present a solution. How do we get that solution there? Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, sir. Let's give it up for Jeff. They all present a different solution. And so when I think a little bit of all the different faith systems that are out there, I believe it looks a little bit like climbing a ladder. And so if I can explain that here, we have Buddhists who believe that there is no God. And they believe there is no God, but there's enlightenment to be achieved. And the way that you achieve enlightenment is, the problem with humanity is that we have so many material attachments, and we have so many affections and things that get in the way from making the right ethical choice and being constantly and open and compassionate for other people. And through a series of teachings, meditations, fasting, and giving to the poor, and doing these different things, we start to rid ourselves of earthly desires. And eventually, if we can do enough of these things, we can climb up and achieve nirvana, a freedom from ourselves, and reach enlightenment and have total compassion for the world. So the problem is myself, and the way that I get rid of myself is through meditation and a series of things, and I start to climb the ladder to get to the solution. For my Hindu friends in high school, having conversations with her, she shared with me that there are many different ways that Hindus approach this, because there's many different factions of Hinduism. But the baseline is that there's millions of gods, and that one of the ways that we get through life is that life is tiring, and it's hard to live. Life is difficult, and we're full of karma and this difficult thing, and so life is difficult. The best thing to do is to escape from the cycle of life and death and achieve what's into moksha, which basically our soul leaves the cycle of life and death and goes into a sea of souls where we cease to exist as one person but become collectively one with the universe. And so the way that we do that, it's like, okay, that's great. I can understand existence is tired. I see that it makes sense that I don't want to keep living and all this stuff, because there's a lot of work to life. There's a lot of pain and stuff. So how do I get rid of the karmic cycle? Well, it's the same thing. You climb a ladder, you do mantras, you pray, you learn, you go on pilgrimages, you do all sorts of different types of fasting, you give to the poor, and as you do, you break through the karmic cycle. In addition to that, you have to accept your lot. And then part of that is the caste system, is you're born into a system, and that's your lot. And part of the way that you move up the caste system is that you live your life the best that you can, and then maybe, when you come back, you've gotten enough karma, gotten rid of the bad karma and got the good karma, that when you reincarnate, you'll be in a different caste system and eventually move your way up so that you can eventually evolve and escape into the sea of souls. But again, the problem is this existence that's tiring and full and broken, and the way to do it is exist into the universe, and we do that by climbing a ladder. For my our Mormon friends, Michelle's got a really good friend that's Mormon, and they have a beautiful, similar faith that's very, very similar to Christianity, and sometimes even sounds like Christianity. But again, there's these certain issues in humanity that need to be addressed, and by following different teachings, Jesus' teachings, doing things like getting married, praying, giving to the poor, moving to different locations, giving childbirth, we could do these things and achieve different levels of heaven. And I remember hearing a conversation with Michelle about this, that her friend was concerned for her until she got married. And then until she had children. Because even though she wasn't a Mormon, she was able to get a couple things, so at least she wouldn't be at the bottom level. She's achieved something a little bit higher. But again, the problem is climbing a little bit higher up the ladder. And so we do that by taking a few steps higher and higher up the ladder. And I talked to our other friends that are Muslim. The ladder seems to be even steeper and even higher. And we grow in an area right now where our area is continually growing with more and more people that are coming from different faiths and different systems, and many people from Muslim faith. And you have conversations with them, and you see a huge devout faith that they all possess. And it's a challenging faith, and a faith that's very devout, full of prayer and ritual and things. And the way that they achieve the problem is that they know that mankind is sinful and that Allah is holy, and that only Allah and Allah alone gets to decide who gets in and who doesn't. And Allah may or may not choose to show you mercy. And when you ask, how do you get Allah to show you mercy? You get mercy by climbing up the ladder of 5 pillars of faith. I think they have those 5 on the screen here. We can put those up there. Make sure that's level. All right. So you climb up. He said Shahada, which is faith, Salah, prayer, Zakat, charity, Psalm, I'm saying wrong, fasting, and Hajj, which is pilgrimage to Mecca. And by doing these things faithfully and religiously, you can eventually maybe, just maybe, get mercy from Allah. But if you ask a person, do you know that you're secure in your faith? If you do these things with your whole life, will Allah show you mercy? And there's no guarantee, because only Allah gets to decide. And when you ask if Allah is loving and if he's these different things, there was one famous Muslim who said this. He was a famous Muslim scholar from a long time ago. His name is Al-Jazari. He says, Allah remains above the feelings for love. In the few instances that love is referenced in the Quran, that any love Allah has for humans is clearly reserved those who earned it. So again, we see this picture where that this holy reverence between God and man, the separation that's caused by our sin, is removed by climbing a ladder. I talked with a Muslim when we were on one of our service trips in Toronto, and he had this conversation with me about how Muhammad was superior to Jesus because Muhammad had more strict rules. And the superiority of Muhammad's teaching was that there was more rules and more guidelines that seemed to surpass the standard that Jesus had. And that from his experience with Christians, that there wasn't a reverence to this idea of holy God, and that their God seemed to be sort of, our God seemed to be, I don't know what the right word is, I'm drawing a Landolcher down there, I can't get down there, but the idea that God would actually seem to be irreverent and would actually stoop down to our level would just be shameful of their understanding of God and holiness. And so when we talked to him, I said, well, I don't understand. And he started saying, well, really, when you look at Muhammad's rules, there's more rules and more expectations, and that our devotion is much more stronger than a Christian, and therefore it's superior. And at surface level, I thought, that does seem to be kind of true. And so after that conversation, there's a lot of details I'll spare, but we talked for a good 20 minutes while the students were cleaning up in a park. And I went home and I started looking at the teachings of Jesus. And I said, well, how does Jesus approach law and holiness? And I started to realize that Jesus, in a really real way, presents the same problem. We are sinners, and we are in need to get to God. And not only is a ladder presented to be climbed, but Jesus actually elevates the standard that much higher. Jesus takes the same law, and he elevates it. Jesus said, you've heard it said that when you've heard it said, but I'm going to tell you the truth. And he said, you may say that you hate your brother, but let me tell you what, is the same, and you're guilty and you stand guilty before God. You might as well have killed a person if you hated somebody. Whoa. So it's not just my external stuff, God, that you're interested in. You're interested in my internal stuff. Well, if you look lustfully at a woman, it's as though you stand guilty of committing adultery. Not just like theoretically guilty, but in God's eyes, you are guilty of committing adultery if you've looked lustfully at another woman. Wow. And that's happened in my life. I stand guilty. If you felt hatred, you're guilty of killing somebody. It's not just that you should be good and kind to other people if you've even thought this. And so as you look at the teachings of Jesus, he presents a ladder and he presents a standard that we can't even climb to. And the standard is so high, in fact, that it goes to our hearts and our thoughts and our minds and our very attitudes. And I could be really good about doing religious things, and I could be really good about praying, but it doesn't take even just stubbing my toe before my attitude gets bad real quick. It doesn't take being slighted or feel like someone gossiped about me to have my heart change for somebody really quick. And then I realized that this heart of mine is not just about exterior performance to climb a ladder, but this heart of mine is sick and it needs to be fixed. And the thing that separates Jesus from everybody else, the thing that separates Jesus and why we say Jesus is our main thing, is that while the rest of the world presents us with a ladder, Jesus comes down to us. And the verse here is this, Pete. It's coming on the screen. You see, at just at the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous man, though for a good man someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. When the rest of the world presents us with a ladder to climb to take care of man's problem, because we all see it. We all see it. We all recognize it. The whole world knows that something needs to be fixed. But when it comes to presenting us with a solution, even atheism says the best way to get out of atheism or to grow is to be more educated and to be a better citizen in a better society so that we can be a better species for the days to come. There's a ladder to climb in every faith system and to fix what we see as man's problem. And Jesus identifies it and says, let me tell you what, you are ungodly. And while you were still powerless, while you're powerless to take care of your situation, while you're powerless to fix your marriage, while you're powerless to fix the attitudes and the hearts and the thoughts of your minds, when you were in the middle of your worst sin, your worst attitude, Jesus died for you. He didn't even wait for you to get the conclusion that you need to fix yourself. Jesus doesn't even wait for you to wake up to the reality that something needs to get fixed. Jesus doesn't wait for you to say, okay, I'm ready to climb the ladder, and then Jesus says, okay, I'm going to come down to you. Jesus came down to you while you were still sinning, while you were still thinking about doing the wrong things. Jesus came down to you, and he comes down to us, and he says his grace is available through him. And what sets this is what sets the gospel apart from everything else. This is what gives us the conviction that says when we want to be a church that makes disciples, when we want to be a church that's telling the world that there is a hope, we could tell the world that you could stop climbing the ladder. Yeah, we see the problem. We recognize it. I see it in myself. I'm not trying to convince you. You know it yourself. So you can stop right where you are. And in the middle, even before you turned around, Jesus had come to you, and he's come for you. And this is why we build our lives around Jesus. Paul says this in Philippians 2, chapter 2, 6 through 11. He says, consider Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God something to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. Being born in the likeness of men, he found in human form. He humbled himself, and becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed his name above every name, so that the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So why Jesus? Because only Jesus made a way when there was no way. Why Jesus? Because when the bar was set too high, Jesus meets us where we're at and lifts us up. Why Jesus? Because Jesus alone and in his name alone, every knee will bow and every tongue confess that he alone is Lord. Why Jesus? Because he's our good shepherd. He says, I am the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. No other faith system do we see the God of the universe laying down his life for the mistake that we made. God's grace is amazing. Why Jesus? Because Jesus is the hope for the broken. He said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick, for the Son of Man. Jesus did not come for the righteous, but to call the unrighteous. That's you and me, Mark 2:17. Why Jesus? Because Jesus is our ransom. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, to give his life as a ransom for many. Why Jesus? Because Jesus is our fulfillment. Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. John 6:35. Why Jesus? Because he's our truth. We sang it this morning. Jesus said, I am the way. He's very unapologetic about who he is. He says, I am the way and the truth and the life. And he's not just the giver of truth. He's not just a teacher of truth. He is the embodiment of truth. And when you're walking with Jesus, you are walking with the truth. Why Jesus? Because he is our way to the Father. He says, no one comes to the Father except through me. And Jesus is okay being exclusive about that claim because only Jesus did what he did for you and me. Jesus is our source. Jesus said, all who are thirsty, come to me and drink, and streams of water will flow from within. Jesus has been here since the beginning. He didn't just arrive in history. He said, before there was Abraham, I am. Jesus is our rest. Jesus invites us. He says, come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke, my teaching is easy, and my burden is light. And Jesus was raised on our behalf. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life, and the one who believes in me even will live even though they die. John 11:25. If you think about that for a minute, Jesus didn't need to raise from the dead so he can get glory. Jesus didn't need to do it. He was fine being Jesus just the way that he was. God didn't need any more glory to do this. God doesn't need praise from you and me. God gets all the glory from heaven and on earth. And so when Jesus was raised, he was raised on your behalf so you can experience new life. No other faith system offers a God that says, I will exchange my life for yours and I will raise you from your situation. And that's why we build our life around Jesus. Jesus' resurrection was for us so that we could live a different kind of lives and experience eternity with him. And so for us, church, as followers of Jesus, we make him our one thing. We orient our lives and our desires and our priority around the person and the work and the purpose of Jesus. And not only is Jesus someone who did this and stands at a distance, but he personally calls you and me to be a part of it with him. And that's our call as a church. In Matthew 4:19, when Jesus called his disciples, he said this, come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. His disciples had come to a conviction about who he was, and they were able to get up and leave everything and follow him. He said, come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Come follow me, know me, be with me, see how I live, see how I teach, see how I operate, see how I pray to the Father, see how I forgive, see how I'm patient, see how I teach, see how I'm bold, see how I'm firm. Follow me, know me, and build your life around me. Obey the things that I've taught you. Learn to walk as I've taught you to walk. Become like me. And then be a part of what I'm a part of. Go and be fishers of men. Let others see that I'm the hope for the world. And for us as a church, this call becomes a stewardship for us. It's not just your call to say I'm a disciple, but it's something that you hold. It's something that you steward. It's something that you use to say, I want to know Jesus. I want to build my life around him. And I want to be committed to helping others do the same. I want to be a fisher of men, trusting and knowing that there's not even nets big enough to contain all the people that Jesus will draw to himself. So as a church, why Jesus? Because he's our everything. And for the world out there, he is their only hope. He is our only hope. So have you made Jesus the reason in your life? Have you taken a moment to tell him you will go where he leads you? Have you taken a moment to say, God, you are my all in all? And have you taken a moment to trust that when you meet with Jesus in prayer, you are meeting with the hope of the world? If we're going to be a church that makes our lives about making disciples, it starts with a conviction in our lives that Jesus, you're my one thing. Let's pray. Jesus, we love you and we thank you for the opportunity to get to know you and just look at your statements in your word. But to know these are not just statements in a book, but these are your statements speaking to us. These are your invitations to us personally in this space, God. And Lord, I pray that for us as a church, that as we look at a world in a sea of ideas, a marketplace of different ideas and thoughts, I know for myself, God, I sometimes lack the confidence to know how to engage the world around me, especially when everyone is telling me that it's wrong to hold on to one truth. Jesus, you were unapologetic by that. And when we look at all the different systems that are out there, we recognize, Lord, that really you stand out above the rest because you came down to us in our sin and our weakness and our brokenness, and only you provide a way out. So Lord, would you start with us? Would you help us to recognize that you're our hope, my only hope? And as we leave this place today, God, would you help us to recognize that you're the only hope for the world? And would you help us to be a part of your movement, to follow you, to know you, to become like you, and to help others do the same. Would you make us fishers of men, God, and would the nets be not small enough? Would they just be breaking at the seams for how many people that you bring to yourself? In Jesus' name, amen.